Introduction of the Automated Decision Safety Act. For those who don't know me, I'm Assemblymember Rebecca Bauer-Cahan, and I represent the 16th Assembly District in the Bay Area. And I'm also chair of the Assembly Committee on Privacy and Consumer Protection, which over the last year has been working to oversee California's AI policy. However, I introduced the first version of this bill prior to being named chair of the committee. I think as we look at the reintroduction of this bill, I want to say that when I started drafting this bill over 2 years ago, working in partnership with the folks at the White House that had worked on the AI Bill of Rights and academics across the country, I envisioned a partnership. I thought that this bill, and I continue to think this bill, is a common sense approach to ensuring that laws that have been in the books longer than I've been alive are a reality. And so we as society agree that protected classes should not be discriminated against. That is a fundamental principle that we live by day in and day out. And as our world moves to more consequential decisions in our life being made by AI tools, by algorithmic decision makers instead of humans, it seems common sense to me that we move to a world where we ensure that those tools don't discriminate, just as we've always ensured that humans don't discriminate. So I have always envisioned in this bill a partnership between those who make the tools and those who are subject to the tools. I had hoped in year one we would see this bill become a reality and it would be simple. We're here with the third introduction of this bill, and I found that not to be the case. And so it's with great pleasure and really an honor that the difference today is that we're doing this in partnership with civil society. There are the people who make these tools, and as I mentioned, there are the people who every day decisions are being made on their behalf by these tools, whether it is housing decisions, lending decisions, healthcare decisions, most employment decisions are being made by these tools today. And it is critically important that the people who experience these decisions every day are at the table, that they are being heard. I've said it before and I'll say it again. I think that as we look at how we regulate artificial intelligence, the guiding principle should be people. People being decision makers, the impacts on people, and that we as government have an obligation to protect communities and build trust in the tools that our communities experience every day. And I believe that this bill will do both of those things. I believe it will make these tools more trustworthy, such that people are able to be subject to them and know that these tools are being used on them and that they're not biased, and that they will then feel comfortable with the outcomes. And so today I am reintroducing the bill that will ensure no bias in automated decision tools, and I'm doing so side by side with SEIU and Tech Equity and the coalition that stands behind them. And I want to thank them both for their partnership as we work to reintroduce this bill, because I think they've brought to the table the voice that, as I mentioned, I think is so central, the voice of Californians. And so I want to turn it over to them next to really talk about how they see the future of this legislation and future automated decision making here in California. So first, I will introduce, I think, Samantha Gordon, who is the Chief Program Officer from Tech Equity.
Thank you. Work with you on this bill as well as SEIU. I think it's no secret that California has a long history of innovation. It's really in our DNA to dream, design, and build technologies that make our lives better. But today's reality doesn't match up with Californians' dream of a better future. Technology, as the Assembly member said, is seeping into every corner of our lives. It's making decisions about whether we get housing, whether we get a job, and it's leaving the door open when these algorithms and these automated decision-making systems are unchecked. It's leaving the door open to tech-powered discrimination, and that's what we're here to address. So most of us don't know that behind these decisions that have major consequences for us economically, safety-wise, there's opaque technology dictating the outcomes. Algorithms, like we said, now decide who gets access to food, to housing, to healthcare, and more things every single day. They're dictating whether you get an interview for a job, how fast your assembly line requires you to work, whether or not you're eligible for public benefits, and that list continues to grow. These algorithms left unchecked can produce biased results, making everyday people vulnerable to automated discrimination without them even knowing about it. We already have example upon example, in particular how risky it is when our governments use automated decision-making systems without guardrails. In 2022, a report found that California's Employment Development Department flagged 1.1 million claims as fraudulent, stopping these workers automatically from receiving much-needed benefits in a time of crisis. Why? Because their automated review software said so. And ultimately, more than half of those claims, around 600,000 workers, were confirmed as legitimate. In Pennsylvania, Allegheny County uses an algorithm to predict which families are likely to neglect their children. Unfortunately, that algorithm weights whether or not you have a disability or you are low income at a higher rate, meaning that you could be unfairly targeted for having your kids taken away because an algorithm said so. And that's just in our governments. There are thousands of companies using automated decision-making systems to determine who will be a trustworthy renter, a suitable candidate for a job, and more. And as the Assembly member said, we have always fought to stop discrimination in our state and around the country. What's different right now is that these tools provide speed, they provide scale, and they use secrecy in a way that we've never confronted before. So that is why we must bring protections for Californians up to speed with today's technologies and how they impact our lives. Systems that shape people's futures must follow clear rules, undergo rigorous testing, and have accountability to avoid harm and ensure fairness. Too often, with these systems, we have a tendency to flick on autopilot and walk away from the wheel, leaving these tools to steer decisions without oversight, regardless of the risk they pose to people in their path. And like we said, the secrecy is increasing. The worst part is that Californians are left in the dark about how algorithms make these life-changing decisions. We have a right to know how tech is being used to evaluate us and have a right to speak out if we believe these decisions are wrong. I love our state, and I know we can do better by ensuring that the companies that develop these tools and the people that use these tools follow a clear set of blueprints to prevent discrimination and provide clear explanations to the public. Californians can increase their trust in these tools and can increase the trust that these life-changing decisions are not being made lightly. Together, we can construct a future where fairness and trust are the foundation of every system. The Automated Decision Safety Act will be the blueprint for that future, and we are honored and proud to partner with SEIU and Assemblymember Bauer-Cahan to make that a reality. And now, I would like to bring up Kimberly Rosenberger, Senior Government Relations Advocate from SEIU California.
Thank you. Thank you for joining us. As mentioned, I'm Kimberly Rosenberger with SEIU California. Why we're here is we represent 750 members throughout California in all 58 counties. Our members work in a range of public and private sector. We're in healthcare, childcare, schools, universities. They're in your homes, your offices. They're in state, county, city agencies. And as such, we are seeing the use of AI in every field, in every sector. We're seeing the use of automated decision systems, and we know what good technology looks like, and we also have experienced firsthand what bad technology looks like. That's why we're proud to partner with Tech Equity and with Assemblymember Bauer-Cahan. She's a champion for working families, and she's pushing that forward and addressing it from all sides of the coin. Our organization represents our members as a whole. We don't just see it as workers, but they're Californians. They're consumers. They're also participants in democracy. And we're proud to be Californians. We like equity. We like making that front and center. And so we will continue to do that despite the challenges we're facing from the federal government. And unlike the federal administration, we are not going to allow Californians to be the test run for technology. We are not going to allow Californians to be a data goldmine for out-of-touch billionaires. And we're not going to allow technology to displace and undermine our workers. California remains undeterred now more than ever. We recognize the need for new technologies that can help our understaffed and under-resourced workers. Good technology allows our workers to be front and center with the people that need them most, making sure that they're healthy, that they're in their homes, that they're feeding their families. Bad technology can do the opposite. Without transparency, accountability, worker and whistleblower protections, Technology is not meeting the goals. Bias and disparate treatment is a constant result. California has existing, robust laws. We can't give technology a free pass or allow it to be the barrier for holding those accountable that are causing harm. We're living at a time of that future. The new way of technology can hold our values, and we see this bill as an important step in reinforcing those values and say that there is no room for discrimination here. We're thankful for the courage of our author and for our partner, and we look forward to supporting and being sponsors of this legislation.
Thank you. Go this way. I want to thank both of our partners. I think that the thing they highlighted that I want to close by really mentioning is the future that we can have, right? I think that one of the things, as a woman who started my career in big law, a male-dominated field, I know what it's like to enter an interview knowing you're 2 steps behind and having to make that up, to work harder, to say more, to be better, to get an equal playing field. And I think that if we do this right, if we build trust, if we build systems that have been tested for bias and don't have them, we can have a future that is brighter than the one today. And that is the goal. It is not that anyone here is afraid of technology. In fact, we want our tech partners to be our partners in a future free of bias. But what we believe is that we need some guardrails to ensure that happens, to build trust and protect communities. And we are excited to build that together. And with that, I am happy to open it up to any questions, if there are any. You got any questions? I don't know if we're doing online questions. I know there's about 40 people online.
Plenty of questions.
Great.
Ask away.
Yeah.
I'm wondering, are there any major changes we should expect in the Automated Decision Safety Act compared to past versions?
Well, you'd have to define major. Such a lawyer that I said that. But, you know, the bill, one of the things I was saying to someone the other day is when we introduced this bill, it was the first in the nation 2 years ago. Now we've seen Colorado pass a bill, New York and Connecticut are working on bills. Senator Markey introduced one in Congress. That has enabled us to work to strengthen the language, to really clean it up, deal with some of the definitions that were tricky and hard. So there will be changes. I think fundamentally the bill is set out to achieve the same goal. So I don't know whether you'd call the changes major.
More than with efforts we've now seen from other states and from.
I'm a big believer in regulatory consistency. I will say, I think that we know our tech companies work across borders, and so we are working to make sure that it is possible to comply with all laws. That being said, we're not letting any other state hold California back.
Are there any political or, I'll start just with political
Yeah.
developments, whether it's something you see from the Trump administration that you think have changed the calculus of the bill or, I think, increased the need for anti-bias technology?
You know, I think the question asks 2 things. One is sort of what are the political calculations? A year ago when working on this, we had an administration in Washington that had the strongest AI executive order one could have ever written. That is no longer the case. That has been rolled back. And so we know that the protections that we were hoping to see when Senator Markey introduced this bill, when the executive order was signed by President Biden, is no longer going to be happening at the federal level. So I think it does change the dynamic for the states, that it is on us more. I think that's a really critical difference, but I don't know that anything here has changed. I think this is just as important as it was 3 years ago, and it will continue to be important as it moves forward. There was a second question, though, and I'm forgetting what it was.
Yeah, in terms of technological developments, we've seen AI become more mainstream and integrated in other apps.
Yep.
I guess, is there any technological development you've seen since you authored your last bill?
Oh, on the tech side. Yeah. So, when I introduced the bill, 50% of the consequential decisions in your life were being made by these tools. That has only increased exponentially in the last 2 years. So 99% of Fortune 500 companies now use these tools for hiring. So pretty much every Fortune 500 company is making hiring decisions using automated decision systems. That leap in technology over the last 2 years, I think, is what makes it even more necessary today than it was then. But the technology itself, I don't think, has changed that much. These are still in large part different than large language models, which is what a lot of people think of when they think of AI. This is legacy AI. They tend to be closed models feeding in historic data to make decisions. Did you want to address any of that? don't know if you have anything to add on the political
I mean,
front.
politically, we just keep hearing, well, like, AI is unbiased, like, it's how we get away from bias, but we've seen recently that, you know, those developers are imparting that bias, and I think that we can't continue to say, I said it before, AI is not a shield for saying that there's no bias there. We've seen it, and we're going to hold them accountable.
And there is, you know, Senator Irwin's bill, which was signed into law last year, which provides some transparency for data sets, is a really important piece of this puzzle as well, because we know that the data sets that feed into these tools are part of what builds in the bias. And so, you know, we got to make sure we're doing everything we can to ensure there is no bias.
So, two quick questions.
Yeah.
Is there a bill number for this one?
We do not have a bill number yet.
And secondly, you mentioned 99% or a lot of decisions are being made with AI-related tools at this time. So is discrimination taking place today?
Yeah, do you want to touch on that, Sam?
Yeah, I think a lot of the examples you're going to hear are from governments where there's more transparency around their use, right? And investigations like the ones here that were done by the Legislative Analyst's Office and the auditor. So we're learning things. Part of the problem is that there is no transparency around the use of these algorithms by private systems. So we've been studying the use of algorithms in tenant screening. We're seeing a disproportionate impact on those communities. We also have stories that are self-reported by private companies. There's a famous one from Amazon that they tried to develop an algorithm to help them find like a qualified pool of applicants. They used the existing pool of employees they had, and immediately their algorithm started to demonstrate a very strong gender bias towards men. So they released the results of that as sort of a cautionary tale of like, if we are not testing, if we're not thinking about these inputs, these are the sorts of outcomes we're going to see. And I think, you know, you have a large company like Amazon, but think about the, you know, hundreds of thousands of companies that are deploying this technology that might not be operating on that same blueprint. So I think a lot of the examples in the private sector, we're going to learn more and more as we require transparency and as people get the right to explanation of how these tools function. Mm-hmm.
And I would just add, because I think another area where this is really critically important where we've seen it is in the healthcare space, which I know Sam mentioned, but often they use historic data on spending to make healthcare decisions. As we know, there are huge disproportionate spending in healthcare, and communities of color and low-income communities don't spend as much, and as a result, they've received less adequate healthcare, which is obviously something we need to correct for and ensure everyone has access to the healthcare they deserve and need. Yeah.
What do you anticipate will be the biggest barrier to turning this bill into a law?
What is the biggest barrier to turning this bill into a law? You know, I think that people believe that AI is this mysterious thing. I actually think that has been my biggest barrier, is getting people to understand that AI isn't that complicated, that we can understand it, we can regulate it, we can make it safe and trustworthy. And so I think that that work actually has been done in the building and continues to be done to make sure that we have the expertise in-house to match the expertise in the private sector. It's really hard when government doesn't have that. And I think that's been one of our biggest barriers, but we're working really hard with our partners to make sure that our decision makers in the building have that expertise.
Speaking politically, is it industry groups, business groups, other any specific groups you expect to oppose the bill?
We expect that, like in years past, some of our tech developers and tech industry groups will oppose the bill. I will say we have been in conversation with many of the developers and deployers of these tools to talk about the language, to talk about how to write this policy in a way that they can comply. You know, we hear time and again from some of our biggest developers that they are doing this testing, they are doing impact assessments to ensure there's no bias. So we absolutely believe this is doable. This is not asking too much, but we will continue to be in conversations with industry to make sure that we can, as I said, create a future where this is a part of the equation, but one that doesn't increase bias or perpetuate bias. Awesome. Well, thank you. Thank you, everyone, for being here, and thank you to my partners. Let's go.